Please help me give big smooches to my guests, Yue Xu and Julie Krafchick, the hosts of Dateable and the authors of the new How to Be Dateable book.
Yay.
Thank you.
Smooch
We're
us
so
back.
happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. And I do a lot of podcast interviews. I've interviewed a lot of guests here. Mm-hmm. And there's, sometimes the conversation, it's like, okay, I can see where they're coming from. And sometimes the guests are like, oh, these are my people. You two are my people. We are speaking the same language, and we're certainly speaking the same language with your new book, How to Be Dateable. So this is like exactly how I want to spend my day.
I mean, the feeling is
Us
mutual.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dive into, first of all, how long have you been doing the Dateable podcast?
10 years.
For freaking ever.
A decade, yes.
So why write a book now?
Good question. Very good question. I don't think in the beginning of doing this podcast that we thought we would ever write a book, because we thought we were just sharing funny dating stories. But in 2021, our now editor at Simon Element actually reached out to us over email, and she was a listener and she was in our community, and she said, "You two have a book in you." And so I think that gave us a lot of confidence to say, well, it took us 10 years, but 10 years of research and experience to write a book that we feel very confident about.
Yeah, you definitely had a book in you. And just for those who haven't heard your podcast before, who haven't heard you here on Dates and Mates, give us a little bit of your backstories of how you came to even start the podcast and become interested in talking about dating for a freaking decade.
Yeah. I mean, I think both of us met each other at a pivotal time where we were confused about dating. And we did not have it figured out ourselves. And I personally will speak for myself in the sense that I never tried to be a dating expert. And even just hearing that today, it's kind of funny because I was just so heartbroken and why is dating not working, caught up in what I hear a lot of people going through today. So when Yue and I met, it felt like a perfect time. Like Yue was new to the city that we were both living in, also confused by dating. It was at that point where apps were starting to explode as well, and dating was just changing. We were both in San Francisco at the time, so I think the wave was a little earlier than maybe everywhere else because just tech is such at the forefront, but also just the way people were approaching dating, like the old rules and the way that you were taught to date. Like I remember just being like a later bloomer and being like, okay, well, I'm going to approach dating like I do everything else, like college and getting a job. I'm going to study. And I read all the books and I was not showing up authentically at all. And it was not working. And when we started this podcast, I was just like, why don't things go past the third date? Like, why was it that when I met someone that I thought was the one for me, the relationship didn't end up working? So I think there was a lot of questions, and we decided to dive into them, hearing like people's dating stories so we could learn. And you asked earlier, like, why a book 10 years later? It took us 10 years to understand, what was happening in modern dating, what were the experiences by talking to thousands of daters, to now learn of like, okay, if everyone's frustrated, what can we do differently to actually have fulfilling dating lives?
Yeah, so important. What about you, Yue?
I think I was stuck in the shoulds. I didn't really know what I wanted, but I knew what I should do. And when you get stuck in the shoulds, you lose sight of yourself. So I was losing myself in dating. And what's funny is I was a dating coach for a decade before that, thinking I had it all figured out. I was really good at coaching clients to trick people into liking them. And when I moved to San Francisco in 2015, I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Like none of the old rules apply. I no longer am interested in tricking people to liking anybody. How do we have authentic connections? So I was very lost, and I was ready for kind of a clean slate in dating.
I feel like there's a lot of people listening right now who are like, but I need that now. And, I've been a dating coach for almost 2 decades as well. And I have seen there's been several iterations of the dating experience. I definitely hear you on there was, sort of a more manipulative, more like a game like
Yes.
approach. And I talked in After the Fairy Tale about like the rules was the women's version of teaching, the dating tricks. And then there was the game for men. And it did land us, as you said, Yue, just in this sort of inauthentic place of dating. And I have seen a big shift, again, towards authenticity. And yet at the same time, from the letters that people write into the show and from all of my clients, I am seeing in the last year or two a huge dissatisfaction, a growing dissatisfaction with dating. And it seems that you're seeing it too, based on sort of where you begin your book.
Yeah.
We're in a love crisis, you say.
Yeah.
Why is it a crisis?
I mean, I think it's what you were saying, Damona. It feels harder than ever before. And people are feeling just the mental health effects of dating, that, you keep going on all these dates and nothing seems to work out. And in a world where we have so many options, why does it feel like there are never enough people there? And in theory, that should be better. And I think there's a lot of benefits of the world we live in. The fact that we can carve our own path. We don't have to go down a specific way. But that's also really confusing because there is no roadmap. I think the rules, the benefit of that was that it gave you a blueprint. It didn't necessarily work, but at least it felt like you were following something, where now it's kind of this free-for-all that's just confusing. And we feel like, even though maybe like consciously we know like, oh, we shouldn't play games or we shouldn't do all this stuff in the old guard, but all that still seeps through. Like, you probably get this all the time, like questions about like, when should I text back? Or, when should I sleep with them on the, it's all of it's like, how do I manipulate the situation, even if we don't think we're doing that? And a lot of it runs deep,
Okay, I'm going to ask you a very direct question. Because you said it feels like dating is harder today than ever before. Is it?
It truly is. It really is.
Tell me more.
So here's the thing. Like, if you just look at the trends of dating, back in the day, 20, 30, 40 years ago, people dated within their network. They formed organic connections. They did not have to win people over because they saw these people over and over again. They had FaceTime with them, and over time, attraction was built. Then when dating apps came on the scene, it was like, now you're expanding outside of your network, and now you have to convince strangers that you are lovable, that you have partner material, that you could spend your life together. So then we had to have these games and rules because we didn't know how to, I guess, quote unquote, win people over. But now we're at a new phase in dating where people say, okay, I don't want to win people over anymore. That's not organic. I want to have authentic connections like people had back in the day. But how do we do that in this world that's so big now? We've had expanded choices, and people are more self-aware than ever. So with all this new information and all these new options, how do we get back the organic, authentic connections from back in the day, but in a modern world? And that's why it's harder than ever, because we don't know how to navigate this right now. And so many people are giving up on dating and love, or thinking about giving up on it, because there's so much information out there, and they're confused, and there's just a lot of inaction.
I'll go with you on that, because I hear a lot that it is harder, and I'm like, well, but just as a woman of color in the modern world, I feel like dating apps ultimately, they expanded my dating pool. They made it a lot easier for me to date. I have a lot of clients who are divorced, who are finding that they're able to access a dating pool when before it was like, just like, I guess, wait for somebody else somebody else's relationship to break up, and then you can swoop in. But now we can really do the choosing. But it is just what you said, Yue. It's the amount of options that we have. Not that it's making people unable to choose. I truly don't believe that the paradox of choice is I just don't believe in that. My husband will disagree with me. I just don't believe in it. But I do believe that when we have to make choices, or we have to seek out that information, or we have to hold our boundaries, or we have to find the right words, or we have to hold this text and try and interpret what they actually intended. All of those things eat up mental energy.
Yes.
And that's why it feels harder, because we're freaking exhausted. We're exhausted.
So exhausted.
So I think my take might be like maybe in the middle of the two. And I see where Yue is coming from, and I agree with all of that as well. And I think what has happened is people feel like they have to follow this script of how dating works today. And our take is, if you get out of that mindset, which is what our book is about, like when we were thinking about it, we're like, we don't want to write another book about how to navigate modern dating and deal with the way modern dating is. It's almost like, how do you rise above it and go back to the basics of building on connection? Because when you think about it, a lot of dating is built around disconnection, like playing those games or holding back the text. Like all of that is disconnection. And that, I think, is what's missing in today's world. So, at the start of I agree with you, Damona. I think the paradox of choice is just scratching the surface. I don't believe that's like the real challenge. And like when we were actually thinking about like, what is it that is really getting in our way, we boiled it down to like 4 main traps, which we felt like were the expectation of love on demand, that we just expect everything instantaneously in today's world. What we also call the settling paradox, that we feel like, and this actually aligns with what you've said before, it's like we feel like because we have so many options, we can like cherry pick this perfect list of a partner, but then we settle for situationships or relationships that aren't fulfilling. And then the validation trap, where dating becomes more than just dating. It's a reflection of self. It's, I'm not good enough because I'm not in a partnership. And like, I need to be liked by so many people, and like things that actually aren't it, the mental energy that you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to get into the 4 traps, and also into some of the solutions, too. But I think first we just have to define dateable. You call your podcast Dateable. The book is How to Be Dateable. How do we even define dateable? Because I'm sure there are people listening who are like, I'm dateable. I mean, I don't have a date, but I'm dateable. So what's the problem?
Yeah.
It's dateable.
Everyone's dateable.
What does it mean, though? What does it mean to you? Having written the book, How to Be Dateable. What does dateable mean? Yue?
I think if I were to give a definition to it, because we do have a definition for it in the book, but if I were to give my personal definition for it that it relates to me, is someone who seeks growth and expansion through dating. And it's not about making dating their entire life, but to grow from dating experiences.
Ooh, that's deep. That's deep. Do you have a similar definition or something different, Julie?
I mean, I think like the word able keeps coming to us, like when we think about like dateable and able, and it's like the ability to be emotionally available, to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, to write your own rules and carve your own path. I think that's what dateable means to me, of not necessarily going along with the masses or doing things that don't feel authentic to you, but figuring out what is it. We have in our book, The Dating North Star, like what is it that I really want? What is it that is important to me? And how do I stay true to myself in using that as a measure of success, opposed to, did I go on another date?
Damona, what would be your definition of someone who's dateable?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I think your definition of someone who's willing to learn through dating really helps put it in perspective. Because I would say a willingness, someone who's dateable has a willingness to dive into the experience of dating in the entirety of what that means. Because diving into dating means learning from your experiences, learning more about yourself. It also means some disappointment. It also means building certain skills that maybe you thought you had. So I think it's all of those things. But I love how in the book you've come at it from different perspectives. Like you identify different types of daters too, because you can be dateable, but you can interpret things from a different lens than the person sitting across from you.
Totally. And I mean, that is the crux of it too, is that everyone is dateable. There's certain things that are our biggest assets and things that are getting in our way. And that is what we have is like the 5 dating archetypes. There's a quiz that people can take and figure out what is their archetype, like how do they show up with dating, what are some of their behaviors and attitudes, and what's also holding them back from it. And we believe at the core that, yeah, like everyone's dateable, but it's modern dating that's setting us up to fail. And if we don't recognize some of these traps that are getting in our way, then we can get really sucked into the modern dating culture instead of like actually using dating for what it is to find the right partner for us.
Yeah, I love the quiz. And I also have to say, I love your book is so cute.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
There's all of these illustrations. I wanted illustrations. They would give them to me. But your illustrations really make it accessible, make it fun, and help us not. It's this weird balance of not taking it too seriously, but also taking it seriously. Am I making any sense?
No, we've
where it's like
gotten
you have
that
to
from
show
people.
up, right?
Yeah, and I think that ultimately is kind of what got UA and I through dating too. Is like we had each other, we had the dateable community to like feel this. Of course, we want to talk about what's most important to us is finding love and the relationship that we want, and being like even beyond that, like being good with ourselves when dating, but also bring some lightness to it, because if you just get wrapped into that all the time, it can start to feel exhausting in that mental load you were talking about.
For sure.
And also, Julie did the illustrations. I just have to point out. So that's why we got illustrations, because Julie made them.
Why didn't I call Julie?
You should have called Julie.
This is going to be my second career. I love it.
You have so many talents, both of you. And the illustrations are really great. Okay, I want to dig a little deeper here, but first you have to hear this. Thank you for supporting the people and the brands who help us bring you dates and mates for free. Now let's get into these dating archetypes. People do love a quiz.
Yep.
And I feel like everybody, between the attachment styles and the love languages and all that, a quiz can be a quiz or a diagnostic tool can be really helpful in understanding where you're at. So there's 5 types. There's the achiever, the dreamer, the energizer, the maverick, and the thinker. Did you is there like, how with attachment styles it's like, oh well, you want to find someone who's securely attached?
No, and that's
do you have
exactly,
a favorite?
Yes, that's such a good question, because we made this assessment so that there is no qualifier for it. Like there's no better one that you want to be. It's like this is who you are. It's like the relationship schemas that we've done before on our podcast. It's like this is just to shed light on who you are and what may be holding you back. And you might like this, and I think your listeners would. So the entire, like if you take the first letter of each one, it actually spells mated. Like dates and mates.
And that wasn't by design.
It wasn't by design.
Wow.
If you start with N first, it's mated.
I love an acronym. Genius.
I agree with you, A. It's like this, the whole point is like with, I don't know, attachment style. I'm all for attachment style and understanding where you're at and what brought you to it. But we hear people say things like, well, I can't date until I'm secure. Yeah. And that like kind of kills me on the inside, because it's like, while you should always be working to become more secure, like, no, you're never going to be 100% secure. And then with this, it's like, and again, this isn't a replacement for attachment style, just making that clear too. They both serve different purposes.
Totally.
But with this, it's like, lean into your strengths, but then also know what's, like kind of sneaking up for you and be able to address it instead of like staying in the same cycle over and over again. Like for instance, like the ones that we also have, I mean, you can be dominant in one, but most people are dominant in 1 or 2. And then some people even have a little of everything within them. So for me, it was the dreamer and achiever. That was my pairing. And with the dreamer, it's great because you are a warm person. You want that big love story. You're very caring and attentive and, wear your heart on your sleeve. But where it got me in trouble is that I would give people the sixth chance, and I would get ahead of myself and think something was more than it was because I was in a fantasy of what I wanted from someone. And then the achiever was like all about getting to the next milestone. Again, great qualities. You go after what you want in life. It served me well in my career. Maybe not as much in dating when you're always like 10 steps ahead. But then also at the flip side, it's a good quality because someone wants to be with someone where they know where they're going. But where it got me in trouble is one, staying present, but also like I always go back to this example, but I had this situation where a friend made a move on me. And at first I was like, I don't know, this person doesn't really seem like they're in the place for a relationship. They don't seem like the right person. I never thought of them that way. But then I started to entertain it and give it thought. And of course, like the dreamer came out of like, maybe this is my big love. And I just like, was ignoring it this whole time. And then by the time I came to this realization, they had decided that they no longer wanted a relationship. Coincidentally, after we slept together. Anyways, the achiever dreamer in me, instead of letting it go and being like, I already recognize this person was not right for me. They are now telling me they don't want a relationship. Instead, I doubled down. I kept going to try to change this person's mind for 2 years in this friends with benefits situationship before situationship was a word. And it really took like recognizing these behaviors and why this was holding me back. So now if you see like I'm trying to just go to the next stage with someone that's not deserving, you can be like, okay, hold up. This is my achiever getting in my way. Do I even want to be with this person? Or from a dreamer perspective, do I even know this person? Have they shown up for me in the way that shows that they're a good partner, or am I just projecting something on them?
Yeah, it's almost like parts work.
Yeah.
In therapy where you're like,
Yeah.
there's a part of me that is the achiever. And it's almost like if you can separate yourself from that part of you and say, oh, I'm doing that again. And then I can choose, do I want to take on that persona or do I want to date from a different perspective?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what makes you dateable.
And it's not saying like if you're an achiever that suddenly you're just not going to care about milestones at all. Like we're not saying that, but it can allow you to be more present and say like, is the right person showing up for me? And if they're not actually meeting my needs or they're not willing to put in as much effort as I am, then maybe I don't need to get to the next date with them. Maybe I need to cut them off so the right person can show up for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of that is it's being in the right place at the same time that person is in that place and accepting, dare I say, the divine timing of it all. Because like the dreamer can get all caught up in the story, how I feel about fairy tales, the story. And sometimes it literally is just like, wasn't the right person at the right time. Now that Julie has told on herself, I want to know. I want to know about your
stop
type.
us when you know your type too, because this also applies to when you're in a relationship. Like married people also exhibit these archetypes too. So,
you know what? That's interesting because when I read it, I was thinking of it more from like my dating brain. Like of this is how I was. I didn't even think about it from the perspective of where I am right now. So now I have to go back and reread How to Be Dateable.
And it can
all over
change
again.
also, like during different stages of your life.
Yeah, because I was definitely Maverick. That
Okay.
100%.
Perfect. Yeah.
Love them and leave them.
Precisely.
But and maybe a little bit of achiever, but that just but I did a whole dating plan and process with myself to change that. I really would have to go back and reread it and think about it from the perspective of like in my relationship.
In your relationship.
Now, it's funny. It's so funny because when I read it, I was like, oh, my husband's a thinker for sure.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. But
Yeah.
I didn't even think about me, married me now.
I love that you went to your husband, though. You're like, he is this.
Right? I have analyzed you, honey. And that's really what marriage is all about.
Yep.
It's diagnosing your partner.
Yes, 100%.
You are not a narcissist.
Turns out you're not. So UA, okay, you got to tell us now. What's your type?
You and I are very similar. I am maverick through and through, and I still see that even though I'm in a relationship now. This is the person who is very self-sufficient, has very high standards for him or herself and their partners, someone who really respects their space and their partner's space. So this person's like, can really hold their own in a relationship and feels really confident in who they are. Where we might get in our own way is that we love them and leave them. Yes, we leave before things can get deep or when a connection's really built, because things can get hard when there's a connection being built. We may have a hard time being vulnerable, or we feel like we got to get ahead of it. Instead of this person hurting us, I'm going to get ahead of it and I'm going to run away from them so that I don't get hurt.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea.
That's never happened to me ever.
You don't feel called out at all.
No.
And I think
what's it like though?
But tell me more. Yes. And I think in a relationship where I see this coming up is I overcorrect on giving my partner the independence, and I overcorrect on wanting that independence. It's still harder for me to mesh two lives together. For example, I don't want to move in together. I think having my own place is amazing. I want to have my own life, and I want to take these trips on my own, which is great to a certain extent. But I can't do it when things get hard. I can't because we're fighting that I say, well, I'm never going to move in with you. Or because we're having a hard conversation, I go, bye, I'm going to Europe for a month. And I still have those feelings come up, like the knee-jerk reaction of, well, I got to run to preserve my own independence. So that's something I'm trying to get under control in a relationship.
So how do you do that? How do you get that under control? Obviously, you read How to Be Dateable, but is that one of the phases as the 5 phases?
I mean, the first one is letting go. So yes, I think it's acknowledging your type. And the first part of the book is, again, how does this show up in the way that modern dating is built today? How are you contributing to, how are you falling for these traps because of your type? And we bring it back to the archetypes. So once you've gotten that baseline, to come out of it is step 1 is letting go and figuring out what is it that is holding me back. I think what Yue was saying of just acknowledging I do this, and where is this coming from? What stories have I been told or grasped onto, or limitless belief or limiting beliefs? We turn them to limitless beliefs, but limiting beliefs that we all have. There's so much ingrained in us, and it's unraveling is that first step.
Can I also add something that I see come up for a lot of daters of all ages, but especially daters who online dating apps are not their native language, or texting is technology is not their preferred or most comfortable method of communication, which, I actually was just talking to somebody today about texting, and he was saying that he and his wife have very different texting styles. And I was saying how when I originally started texting, I used to say on the Dates and Mates podcast, circa, when did I start this? 2013, I would say texting is for information and not conversation, which it was at the time. But I've had to evolve that. And so I was saying now texting is really my primary way of communicating with my friends, with my colleagues, with most of the people in my life. It's some form of text-based communication, and that's a skill set that I have had to grow into, that I have had to learn, and I've had to adapt. I've had to adapt my dating philosophies and strategies and tools many times as as the world has shifted. So I saw also in that letting go as, this is going to be hard for some of my listeners to hear, but also giving permission to the process of the world of dating, like you just said, like the dating as it is today.
Yeah.
And I think this nostalgia for dating as it used to be, and like, oh, well, wasn't it easier when you just met somebody at church, or, you know, people would go out to bars and clubs and you would meet that way, or like, you know, whatever fantasy we have of how it used to be or how it should be, if we could just let that go and be with what is, that will help us a lot.
To adapt. I mean, also remember, we had texting plans back in the day. We couldn't text unlimitedly. Yeah. Remember that, right? We had to pay per text.
I want to like put a button on that, like a flashing sign. Yes. We didn't have video chat, and we didn't like, it's just we didn't have dating apps. And like, even with dating apps, we had to pay. It was free to join, pay to communicate. Now everybody's like, but I don't want to pay to,
Nobody
I don't
wants to
want to
pay.
pay for these features. And I'm like, well, it's not free though. Yeah. I mean, you get what you pay for. If it's free.
Yeah.
I mean, letting go, I think, of the beliefs that you have, and then it encompasses so much. And some of it's the model of love. Like, I think for me, a big piece of it was like, I had this, like, again, back to the dreamer in me, this like fantasy of how a relationship should unfold and what love looks like. And it made me stay in like an on again, off again relationship for far too long, because I was like, had this belief like love conquers all. And like a healthy relationship seemed boring to me at the time. So a lot of it was like rejiggering that piece too, and, you know, letting go of like what I thought. And I'm really glad you brought that up of like holding on to the past, because dating's always been hard. Like, I agree with what we were saying at the very start of like, yeah, maybe there were less people and you didn't have to prove yourself to strangers. But I just remember like before apps, like being so hard to meet people. And then when apps came on the scene, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And now that apps are mainstream, everyone just wants to go back to like meeting in bars in real life. And that isn't always that easy either. So it's never going to be easy. It's so cyclical.
Yeah, but they don't want to go out.
Right.
Yeah, nobody wants
just
to go
want
out.
someone to appear on your doorstep.
Every time I have a client that's like, well, maybe the apps aren't for me, or I don't want to meet someone that way. So I'll say, okay, here's your dating plan. And then I'll research like, here are meetups you can go to. Here are singles events. Here's a bar. Here's and they're like,
no.
Oh, no. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. Who do I go with? I'm like, see? Okay. So grass is not always greener. But in these phases, there's letting go, and then there's gaining clarity. So is that's more about the dating plan I was talking about I had with myself. Like, once I had clarity, then I was like, oh, this is how I do it differently, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And also, it's the same rule as manifestation. If you don't know what you're trying to manifest, how are you going to get that result? Same thing with dating. If you're not clear about why you're dating in the first place, which, by the way, most people aren't, because when we poll our audience, it's like, why are you dating in the first place? The answers we get are like, to be in a relationship, to not be lonely, to have companionship. But that's not the real reason why you're dating. Like, let's get to the bottom of why you want to be in a relationship with someone, or why you want to feel romance with someone. So once you have that clarity, then you can clear your path to reach that goal.
Oh, that's deep, Yue. That's deep.
I mean, I think this has been personally one of the most instrumental thing that we've seen in people that have met their person, and then also within ourselves. And like Yue was saying, like, it's always these like generic things that we want. And it's not to say that like being in a relationship isn't what you ultimately want, but usually that's in the future. It's not really going like deeper and getting actual clarity. Like, we're pretty sure most people don't want to just be in a relationship with anyone. They want to be in like the right relationship for them. If you want to be in any relationship, you could probably be in any relationship tomorrow. So we have this exercise that we highly recommend people doing, is what we call the Dating North Star. And it looks at why is it that you're actually dating? What is the reason? And we encourage people not to use the words relationship, partner, like any of the generic ones that you would do. And there's even like a way, actually, this was referenced in your book too, Damona, the 5 whys theory of just like getting deeper with things that became popular by like the founders of Toyota. And it's like, let's keep asking why to get to that next layer and really uncover what it is. And when we found people say this, like we have an example of a dater that we talked to that started off like, I want a relationship. I want to feel, get attention from people. And then it came down to like, I want to feel prioritized by someone that sees me for who I actually am. Like that's such a deeper dating why than just like, I don't know, I want to meet people. Like that's so like high level.
And it gets into the feeling. That's what I'm always saying here. Like, how do you want to feel in that relationship? Because I don't like, if you don't like how it feels right now, well, how do you want to feel? Because you probably won't know it when you see it. You won't know the packaging that the person comes in, but you're going to know that feeling of being with the right person that makes you feel that way, feel supported, feel seen. Yep. So you have to show up. We covered that. They're not, unless you're waiting for, your Amazon delivery person. You have to show up.
Showing up is about energy. How you're showing up is more important than just showing up. It's not just about going on date after date thinking it's a numbers game. If you're showing up after a tired day and you just had a fight with your boss and you are not in a good mood, that's not showing up for the date. You're just physically there. You're just existing. So that chapter is really about doing a mental check and an energy check before even engaging with another person.
Yeah. And even being online too. Like people will say to me, oh, well, I've been dating. They're like, they show me like a receipt. Like I have a dating profile, and I'm like, but are you like checking it? Are you using it? Are you liking people? Are you engaging? Are you talking?
Yeah.
I think it's also like if you're dreading going on dating apps, that energy is seeping through. Like it was like, I think this actually, to me, this is one of the most important chapters because I think this is the one that we all think, oh, I got it. Of course I'm showing up. This is good. But it's like, how are you actually showing up? Like, I'll give a personal example. Like for years, I didn't put people's phone numbers in my phone that I met online because I was like, oh, the odds of seeing this person is slim to none again. Like, why save their number in my phone? And I showed up with this energy of I'm not going to see this person again. That is a terrible space to be in going into a date. The second I made a small shift to even just be like, I'm going to put in Kevin in my phone. And then I show up and I'm like, I'm excited to meet Kevin. And that's when things like started to like, I was like, okay, this is a real person. I'm trying to connect with them. They're not just another number and another date and another thing that isn't going to work out. So when we hear everyone that's like, oh, dating is the worst, it's like, are you bringing that into your dates? Because if you are, then that's not the energy that's going to attract someone.
That's so wise, Julie. That's so wise. Even just how you've articulated that energy, because I do hear from a lot of people that are like, I just don't want to meet somebody on a dating app. But then you feel like you're missing the party if you're not there. So you're kind of doing it. But I called it zombie dating. Like you're there, but you're like not present.
Not really there.
You're not really there. So what is the next phase? Investing appropriately.
We love this one too. It is what we were talking about earlier. Why do people feel so burnt out from dating? It's because where are we spending our energy? We're spending our energy on the things that don't really matter, like wondering when we should call someone or text someone back, wondering what is that text we should send, wondering if this dating profile we are trying to analyze for 20 minutes is going to be the person for us. That's going to drain us. And we all have battery levels. We don't have unlimited energy. So just like an investment portfolio, in this chapter, we talk about where can you spend your energy where you're getting the most energy in return, right? It's like if you're feeling drained after an hour on a dating app, stop. Go do something else that energizes you. That's the only way we can really prevent dating burnout so that we don't go to our friends and we go, oh, I'm so sick of dating. Dating is so tough. I'm so drained by dating. Well, you're actually the one draining your own energy. It's not dating.
Oh, wow. I love how you phrase that. Yeah. And like, it's maintenance. Like I just had physical therapy this morning and my PT was like, after you've been on the computer for like 30 minutes, so right after this, I have to do stretches and I have to heat. And it's like, oh, it's kind of a pain, but I know I'll feel better when I do it. It's almost like doing that dating physical therapy, but like mental therapy, emotional therapy, where you fill your cup, your battery back, you recharge your battery. Yes. And putting those practices in place, because otherwise the absence of it is you'll be swiping forever and, in the TikTok wormhole.
Yeah.
And it's inescapable at that point.
I feel like I'm one of the rare people that's pro apps. Like, I mean, I know you are too, but like, I feel like a lot of people
told you you're my people
hating on apps. And I mean, I've met multiple partners on apps and my current partner of over 3 years on an app. And what I did differently though was I knew the limitations of apps. So we talk a lot about that of like, yeah, maybe you only spend 30 seconds looking at their profile. And that's not settling. It's recognizing like, I'm not going to invest 2 hours in my group text analyzing this person that may not even be interested, yet alone active on the app. It doesn't mean you can't look at their profile later. It doesn't mean like you can't have further conversations, but it's recognizing the medium for what it is. I also got rid of notifications because I didn't want to feel like I needed to be pulled in. I had a very, rigid, I guess, but like it was only Sundays that I logged into apps. It was Sunday only because that's the highest traffic. Mm-hmm. And I also learned if you let things like linger for too long, you're never going to meet up in person. So it was, how do I have a conversation? Move this off the app. If I'm not ready to meet, maybe it's to text, get a Google Voice if you really don't want to give out your number. And then also like maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's something else just to progress and learn more about this person and see if it's someone I could date. So there's so many ways to like use them. And I think we always think we need to be like acquiring, going on more. But this is really about like, how do you actually use your time effectively and do it in ways that energize you and invest in the right people and not keep going down the path of like people that aren't even worth your energy at all.
1,000%. And invest in the right tools. Like invest in this book, y'all. Invest in how to be dateable. I swear, I have to have you back because I could literally talk to you two all day. And we've just scratched the surface of what's inside this book. We didn't even get to the 5th phase. So I'm going to let the 5th phase be a mystery for everyone.
Linger. Yes.
And they'll have to read about the 4 dating traps: expectation of love on demand, settling paradox, validation trap, relationship chicken, because it's all inside the book. And it's so cute with all of Julie's illustrations and also so actionable. That's the other thing I love about this. Like with the quizzes and the tools and the typing, it gives us a framework. And that sounds like that's what you were also talking about, Julie, is like having a framework to take all of this that we're experiencing and all this that we're learning and then actually put it into action in our lives.
They all tie together in this framework. I know we're tight on time, but can I leave one last story of how they tie together? Stories. Okay, before I met my partner, there was someone I was talking to that I thought, like, again, because we had interactions, this was actually virtual, and it's like kind of embarrassing to say this, like saying it out loud, but it was during COVID. I was back in Boston. This person was in San Francisco. We were talking every day, all day. I thought I had met like the person that could be my person. And then, of course, this guy was like offering to pick me up from the airport, like all on. As soon as I got back, all of a sudden he was too busy. Couldn't spend an hour, couldn't find any time to meet up. And I think an old me would have hung on to the past of like, there was so much potential, there was so much promise, and try to like push it.
The dreamer in you?
Yes, yeah, exactly. But then this time around, because I knew my dating North Star. I knew I needed someone that prioritized me. I was clear on my needs in a relationship. I was like, if this person can't even make an hour to meet up, they are not worth my time. So that went back to the investment strategy. And I let them go. I was like, look, like, if it's clear we're not in the same place right now, if things change, like, feel free to get in touch. Like, who knows where my life will be, but like, I'm moving forward. And then, like, I don't know, a month later, I met my now partner, who I never had this feeling with. I always felt prioritized, and I could go back to that North Star and knew that he was someone worth investing in.
I love that story. It gives us all hope.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing hope and wisdom and how to be dateable with us.
Thank you, Damona,
Thank you,
for having
Damona.
us.
Always a pleasure to see you both.